Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed that people who grew up with nothing move differently? They don't wait. They don't hesitate. They don't ask for permission because waiting is expensive when you're poor. This story is not about crypto. It's not about Binance. It's not even about money. This is a story about speed. Not the kind of speed you learn in business books, not productivity hacks, not motivation quotes, but the kind of speed that comes from knowing that if you slow down, you don't survive. Before Changpeng Zhao became CZ, before he was invited to conferences, before governments knew his name, before billions moved through systems he touched, he was an immigrant kid in a country that didn't care whether he made it or not. Changpeng Zhao was born in China. His parents were teachers, not powerful people, not wealthy, just ordinary. And in certain political climates, being ordinary is dangerous. His family didn't leave China because they wanted adventure. They didn't leave to chase a dream. They left because staying meant limits. So they moved to Canada, new country, new language, new rules, no guarantees. And suddenly the idea of future became very small. When you're an immigrant family, you don't talk about passion. You talk about rent, about food, about not falling behind. Changpeng Zhao didn't grow up thinking, I want to be successful. He grew up thinking, I can't afford to stop. As a teenager, he worked wherever someone would hire him. Fast food, night shifts, and eventually washing dishes. Let's pause here, because people love to romanticize this part. They say, oh, he washed dishes and became a billionaire. No, what matters is not the dishwashing. What matters is what happens to your brain when you realize that time is your enemy. When Changpeng Zhao washed dishes, he wasn't dreaming. He was calculating. How many hours? How much pay? How fast can this shift end? What skill do I need next? Poor people don't daydream. They optimize. And that's where the speed begins. While other kids were exploring themselves, he was learning efficiency. While others were comfortable being average, he was terrified of being slow, because slowness in his world meant being stuck forever. That fear never left him. Not in college, not in corporate jobs, not even when he became rich. He studied computer science not because it sounded impressive, but because computers were honest. Code works or it doesn't. No politics, no favoritism, no accent bias. If you grew up with nothing, you are drawn to systems that don't care who you are. He didn't become confident, he became useful. And usefulness is the fastest way out of poverty. After school, he joined Bloomberg. Most people see Bloomberg as success. CZ saw Bloomberg as a laboratory. He studied trading systems, market infrastructure, latency, execution speed. He wasn't asking, how do I climb the ladder? He was asking, why is this so slow? Traditional finance moved like it was asleep. Too many approvals, too many layers, too many people touching the same transaction. And for someone raised under pressure, that slowness felt wrong. When you're poor, you don't admire stability. You crave movement. Then came 2013. Someone mentioned Bitcoin. No hype, no headlines, just a conversation. Most people laughed. Digital money, no government, no central control. Sounds stupid. CZ didn't laugh. He listened. Because Bitcoin didn't ask for permission. It didn't wait for banks. It didn't care about borders. It moved at the speed of the internet. And something clicked. This wasn't about price. This wasn't about getting rich. This was about escaping slowness. Changpeng Zhao sold his apartment and went all in on Bitcoin. Think about that. No backup plan, no safety net, no guarantee this thing would survive. Why would someone do that? Because once you've lived poor, you understand something rich people don't. Risk is not trying. Risk is staying stuck. From that moment on, his life accelerated. He joined blockchain.info, then OKCoin. Not as a celebrity, not as a founder, as someone learning fast in a system moving faster. And here's the part people miss. CZ didn't fall in love with crypto culture. He fell in love with throughput. How fast can this scale? How many users can this handle? Where does it break? By 2017, he saw the gap. Exchanges were slow, unstable, crashing during volatility. And CZ had lived his whole life preparing for moments like this. When systems fail, speed wins. So he built Binance. No fancy office, no long planning phase, no hesitation, just execution. Binance launched, and within months it dominated the market. People asked, how did you grow so fast? They thought it was marketing, or luck, or timing. No, it was poverty-trained speed, decisions in hours, not weeks. Product launches in days, not quarters. Problems fixed immediately, not scheduled. Because when you grow up poor, you don't delay survival. And Binance never slowed down. But speed attracts enemies. Regulators noticed. Governments questioned. Media attacked. Most founders panic here. CZ adapted. He moved jurisdictions, changed structures, adjusted strategy, always moving, never frozen. Because freezing is what poverty teaches you to avoid at all costs. And now, billions of dollars move through Binance every day. But the real story was never the money. It was the mindset. A boy who learned early that speed is the only unfair advantage the poor can have. And we're still only at the beginning. And here's something important you need to understand. Speed is not aggression. Speed is not chaos. Speed is clarity. When Changpeng Zhao built Binance, he wasn't trying to outrun competitors. He was trying to avoid hesitation. Because hesitation is a luxury. People who grow up comfortable can afford to wait. They can afford to analyze forever. They can afford to be wrong slowly. But if you grew up with nothing, every delay feels dangerous. That mindset shaped everything inside Binance. Meetings were short. Decisions were binary. Yes or no. Move or drop it. There was no room for maybe. And this confused people. Journalists asked, why does Binance launch features so quickly? Investors asked, why don't you slow down and stabilize? Regulators asked, why are you everywhere at once? CZ didn't answer directly, because how do you explain poverty to people who never lived it? You don't. You just keep moving. Inside Binance, speed wasn't a tactic. It was culture. Engineers shipped code the same way a poor kid finishes a shift, focused, fast, no excuses. If something broke, it wasn't a disaster. It was data. Fix it, deploy again. This wasn't recklessness. This was survival logic. CZ understood something early. In emerging industries, perfection is slow, and slow loses. Binance didn't try to be perfect. It tried to be first, then better. That single philosophy changed the game. While competitors debated compliance frameworks, Binance captured users. While others waited for regulation clarity, Binance built infrastructure. While everyone else hesitated, CZ executed. And execution compounds faster than capital. But speed alone doesn't build trust. This is where most fast companies fail. They move quickly but break relationships. CZ avoided that trap, not by slowing down, but by being transparent. When Binance made mistakes, they admitted it publicly. When systems failed, they communicated immediately. Because people forgive speed, they don't forgive silence. Remember, CZ grew up knowing that silence often means abandonment. So Binance never went quiet. Then came BNB. Binance Coin wasn't just a token, it was a design choice. Lower fees, incentives for loyalty, a reason to stay. It wasn't hype-driven, it was functional. CZ doesn't romanticize assets, he builds tools. BNB became fuel, then Launchpad. Instead of fighting new projects, Binance empowered them. This did two things. It pulled innovation toward Binance and it made Binance unavoidable. Again, speed logic. Don't block traffic, redirect it. Then came Binance Smart Chain. This was controversial. Ethereum purists mocked it. Critics called it centralized. CZ didn't argue philosophy. He asked one question. Does it work faster? Cheaper, quicker, more accessible. That's it. People who grow up poor don't care about ideological purity. They care about utility. And users followed. Developers followed. Money followed. Binance became not just an exchange, but an ecosystem. And ecosystems are hard to kill. But with scale comes pressure. Governments intensified scrutiny. Regulatory headlines increased. Threats of bans appeared. This is where most founders crack. They slow down. They retreat. They compromise momentum. CZ did something different. He decentralized himself. No fixed headquarters, no single jurisdiction. People mocked this too. They said it was evasive. They said it was risky. But for someone raised moving countries, movement was normal. Staying still felt more dangerous than adapting. CZ had learned this lesson early. Stability is not safety. Adaptability is. And Binance adapted faster than regulators could categorize it. Not illegally, but fluidly. Always one step ahead. And here's the truth most biographies avoid. This level of speed is exhausting. It costs relationships. It costs peace. It costs simplicity. CZ didn't live a balanced life. He lived a focused one. Because when you come from nothing, balance feels like distraction. People asked him, when will you slow down? He didn't answer. Because slowing down was never part of his identity. Not as a dishwasher, not as a developer, not as a founder. Speed saved him once. Why would he abandon it now? And this is where the story deepens. Because success doesn't erase poverty programming, it amplifies it. C didn't become relaxed with money. He became more intentional. He didn't indulge excess. He avoided it. Minimalism wasn't a brand choice. It was memory. Memory of scarcity. Memory of dishwashing shifts. Memory of knowing that everything can disappear fast. So he built systems that could move faster than collapse. And that's why Binance survived every wave that killed others. Bull markets, bear markets, scandals, crashes. Speed's adaptability, always. But we're not done yet, because the hardest part of this story is not building from nothing. It's carrying that speed when the world finally starts watching. And that's where the real cost appears. When the world starts watching you, speed becomes dangerous. Not because it's wrong, but because everyone else is slower. And slow systems don't like being exposed. As Binance grew, it stopped being just a company. It became a symbol. To users, it was freedom. To competitors, it was a threat. To governments, it was a question they couldn't ignore. And when institutions feel threatened, they don't attack immediately. They observe, they collect language, they prepare narratives. CZ knew this phase well. He had lived it before, just in different forms. Back in China, labels came before consequences. In finance, regulation comes before enforcement. Different settings, same pattern. The pressure didn't arrive all at once. It arrived quietly. An article here, a warning there, a concern expressed publicly. Most founders react emotionally. CZ didn't. He had learned something early in life. Noise is not danger, sudden silence is. So he watched carefully. When certain countries pushed back, Binance adjusted access. When regulators asked questions, CZ answered, directly, publicly, calmly. Not defensive, not apologetic, just factual. Because when you grew up poor, you learned not to over-explain. Over-explaining sounds like weakness. Binance hired compliance teams, expanded legal infrastructure, engaged policymakers, but it never slowed core execution. That balance is rare. Most companies choose one, move fast or be compliant. CZ insisted on both, not because it was easy, but because stopping wasn't an option. You need to understand something here. CZ doesn't trust permanence, he never did. When you grow up moving countries, nothing feels permanent. Jobs vanish, policies change, stability collapses, so you build for impermanence. Binance was designed to survive disruption. Technical, legal, geographical. That wasn't paranoia, that was memory. And memory is a powerful architect. But success has a cost people don't talk about. Isolation. When you move faster than everyone else, you outgrow conversations. People can't keep up with your thinking, they misunderstand your silence. Friends drift, peers speculate, and critics simplify you into headlines. CZ wasn't charismatic, he wasn't dramatic. That confused people. They wanted a villain, they wanted arrogance, they wanted sound bites. Instead, they got calm, minimal words, measured responses. That calm wasn't confidence, it was restraint. When you've lived with instability, you don't waste energy reacting, you conserve it, because reaction slows you down. Behind the scenes, the workload was brutal. Constant travel, endless decisions, no pause. People assume founders enjoy power. CZ didn't chase power, he chased control of velocity. How fast can we respond? How fast can we adapt? How fast can we rebuild if necessary? That's not ambition, that's survival logic. And it wears you down. There were moments when Binance could have slowed, taken fewer risks, chosen comfort. CZ didn't, because comfort is deceptive. Comfort whispers, you've done enough. And for someone shaped by poverty, that whisper sounds like a trap. So Binance kept expanding, education, infrastructure, humanitarian initiatives. CZ donated quietly, not because of PR, but because he remembered. He remembered families relocating. He remembered uncertainty. He remembered how fragile life feels when systems fail. Crypto to him was never about speculation. It was insurance against systems breaking, and systems always break. That belief became clearer during market crashes. When others panicked, CZ focused on liquidity. When fear spread, Binance stayed operational. Because nothing builds trust like staying functional when everyone else freezes. Speed again. Not flashy speed, emergency speed. The kind you need when the house is on fire. And here's the irony. The faster Binance moved, the more people expected perfection. They forgot this system was built by humans moving at extreme velocity. Mistakes happened. CZ didn't deny them, he absorbed them and kept going. But there's a cost to always being ahead. You're rarely understood in real time. Understanding comes later, sometimes too late. CZ accepted that. He didn't need applause, he needed progress. And that mindset kept Binance alive through cycles that erased others. But we're approaching the hardest part of this story. Not growth, not pressure, but the moment when speed collides with consequence. When the world decides it's time to slow you down. And how a man shaped by poverty responds when slowing down is no longer a choice, but a demand. When the demand to slow down finally came, it didn't arrive as a request. It arrived as pressure. Not one voice, not one country, but many, layered, coordinated, relentless. This is the moment every fast-moving founder fears. Because at this stage, it's no longer about fixing bugs or improving systems. It's about identity. The world wasn't asking Binance to adjust features. It was asking it to change its nature, to move slower, to be predictable, to fit neatly into categories that were designed for banks, not networks. And here's the conflict. CZ had built his entire life around one truth. If you slow down too early, you never catch up again. But now slowing down was being framed as responsibility, as maturity, as legitimacy. This is where most stories become dishonest. They paint founders as heroes who fight everyone, or villains who refuse accountability. Reality is quieter. CZ wasn't angry, he wasn't defiant, he was calculating. He asked a different question. How do we reduce friction without killing velocity? Because stopping was not an option. So Binance began restructuring internally. More compliance, more transparency, more localized engagement. But here's what didn't change. Decision speed, execution pace, adaptation rhythm. The core stayed intact. And that frustrated people. They wanted submission, they got adjustment, they wanted stillness, they got movement. That's when narratives hardened. Headlines simplified complexity, critics amplified fear. CZ became a symbol again. Not of innovation, but of discomfort. And symbols attract projection. People who don't understand speed call it recklessness. People who never lived scarcity call urgency greed. But urgency for CZ was memory, memory of instability. Memory of watching systems fail families. Memory of knowing that tomorrow is never guaranteed. So when pressure mounted, he didn't cling to titles. He focused on continuity. Leadership to him wasn't about position. It was about keeping the machine alive. And that's when the most misunderstood decision came, stepping back. To outsiders, it looked like surrender. To people who live fast, it looked like strategy. CZ understood something most don't. Sometimes the fastest way forward is to remove yourself from the point of friction, not disappear, not retreat, but reposition. The system mattered more than the individual. That choice makes no sense if you're driven by ego. It makes perfect sense if you're driven by survival. CZ didn't build Binance to be remembered. He built it to function. And stepping aside protected that function. This wasn't the end of speed. It was speed in another form. Let the system keep moving without becoming a single target. People asked, was it worth it? That question only makes sense to people who measure life by status. CZ measures life by momentum. If momentum survives, everything else is negotiable. And here's the truth that rarely gets said. The cost of moving fast for decades isn't money, it's solitude. When you're always ahead, few people truly understand you. They judge outcomes without knowing pressure. They talk about decisions without knowing consequences. CZ accepted that too, because loneliness is familiar to people who grew up poor. You learn early that no one is coming to save you, so you stop expecting applause. You focus on continuity. Binance continued, markets cycled, fear rose and fell, competitors disappeared, and the system kept processing transactions quietly. That's success from the perspective of speed, not headlines, not praise. Functionality under pressure. And now, after everything, the poverty, the migration, the dishwashing shifts, the sleepless nights, the scrutiny, what remains is not an empire, it's a principle. That speed, when born from necessity, is not reckless, it's precise. It cuts through inefficiency, it bypasses permission, it refuses stagnation, but it also demands sacrifice, time, relationships, misunderstanding. C paid those prices willingly, because for someone who started with nothing, standing still was never an option. And this is where the story finally circles back. Not to crypto, not to Binance, but to that immigrant kid watching seconds pass behind a sink full of dishes. Learning without knowing it, that life doesn't reward patience equally. It rewards those who move before the door closes. Nothing about this story is clean. There is no perfect arc, No moment where everything settles and stays that way, because real speed never rests. People like to ask, what did Changpeng Zhao sacrifice? They expect dramatic answers. Health, family, peace. Those are true, but the deeper cost is harder to see. It's the inability to ever fully slow down. When your nervous system is trained by scarcity, stillness feels unsafe. Even success can feel temporary. Even wealth can feel fragile. That's why CZ never celebrated loudly, never lingered in comfort, never attached himself to status, because attachment slows you, and slowing down was never his language. He didn't need validation, he needed continuity. People talk about legacy as if it's something you design. CZ doesn't think that way. Legacy is what remains after momentum outlives you. Binance was built to keep moving without him. That's not detachment, that's discipline. The discipline of someone who learned early that systems matter more than personalities. That lesson came long before crypto. It came from migration, from adaptation, from learning that nothing is permanent except movement. So when people debate his choices, criticize his speed, question his methods, they're missing the point. This wasn't a man trying to beat others. This was a man trying not to freeze. And freezing is fatal to people who come from nothing. The world prefers slow heroes, predictable leaders, comfortable narratives. CZ never fit that shape. He wasn't loud, he wasn't charming, he didn't sell dreams, he built pathways, and pathways are invisible until millions walk them. That's why this story doesn't end with applause. It ends with motion. Somewhere, transactions are still clearing, blocks are still being produced, systems are still running, quietly. And somewhere else, another kid in another country is learning the same lesson without realizing it yet. That waiting is expensive. That permission is optional. That speed is sometimes the only advantage you'll ever get. Not speed as ambition, speed as necessity, speed as survival. That's what poverty teaches when it doesn't break you. It sharpens you. And once sharpened, you don't return to stillness. You move. Not because you're chasing more, but because stopping was never safe. And maybe that's the truth people don't want to hear. That success is not always peaceful. That progress often comes from discomfort. That some people don't build empires to feel powerful. They build them so they never have to feel powerless again. And with that understanding, the story doesn't need a moral. It doesn't need advice. It only needs silence. Because if you've lived it, you already understand. And if you haven't, no explanation will ever be enough.